To my fellow entrepreneurs and startup founders out there, have you had a conversation with someone who just spent 6 months in San Francisco's Silicon Valley? Well, I have. I just finished my latest episode with Louis from Bookt, talking about AI, scale-up, VCs, the American mindset around how to build a tech company, and the absolute obsession with finding product market fit. Tune in. Welcome to Solving the People Puzzle, the HR Thought Leadership podcast hosted by myself, Francois de Wet. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to an exciting episode on Solving the People Puzzle, where, as always, the aim here is to bring you value around how to help you solve your people puzzle. Now, usually I am interviewing HR managers, HR executives, individuals from large corporate organizations. And this year I decided to also change that up and bring in a blend of different business leaders from different walks of life who are in different stages of their organization and their business. And so it's a massive privilege for me to have with me Louis Neal from Bookt. Louis, welcome firstly to the Whammy Podcast studio, and then also welcome back to South Africa. It's been quite a year. How are you?
Very good. Thanks, Francois. Thank you for having me. The office looks incredible. Since I was here last, you guys are doing some really, really cool stuff. No, it's been good being back in South Africa, but also it's bittersweet. Once you get exposed to that ecosystem there in the US, it does change your perspective a little bit. So I'm eager to get back, and I will be traveling back pretty soon.
Okay.
So counting down the days.
Nice. Well, before we dive into that, because it is a big part of the conversation today and something that I'm very curious to hear about, let's just take the audience and the followers back to Bookt, yourself. What is Bookt? I know a bit about it, but let's not assume that everybody does.
What is Bookt? Man, if you ask me that question once a year over the last 5 years, the answer will be different every time.
10 different answers.
So maybe what I'll do is I'll start I finally arrived at the vision statement for the company. Now, you'd think you start, that's there from day one.
And then the website.
Yes. But turns out it's extremely difficult. And only through various successes, failures, iterations do you really understand the fundamental reason why you started the company in the first place, what the bigger purpose is, why you work so much every day, etc. And I could never quite put my finger on it. What's driving me? Why Bookt? Why, is it so important that we make a big success of it? And we finally arrived at a vision statement, and essentially comes down to reigniting humanity's curiosity. Sure. So curiosity is the key word there. Okay. I think it's probably the most important trait any person can possess.
Especially in 2025.
Especially in 2025. I suppose you could say that every year moving back the last 2,000 years, but anyway, curiosity, I think, especially, parents instilling that trait into their children, I think that's extremely important. But just really kind of reigniting that in humanity is very, very big, thing we're pushing for. And I think, obviously, curiosity is the precursor to action. Action is the precursor to progress. So you really do need that first little kernel of curiosity to have progress on the individual, the micro and the macro level. So that for us is a big thing. And, Bookt started as in the reading world, in the book world. We still are there. Yeah. And why it's so important to me that we get people reading, get people learning. And it's not even just learning. I mean, whether you want to read a fiction book, we want you to get lost in a story. Yeah. And that is that curiosity aspect. We want you to become more curious, wonder more, ask more questions. And that's the really, really thing, very important. And that's really the core thesis behind Bookt and I think the reigniting word is because I do think we have lost that curiosity as a society a little bit. And I think I lay a large part of the blame on social media. Obviously it's a complicated process, but I do think people in general have lost a little bit of curiosity, that just will to ask why, or why is it that way, or how does that work? Yeah. Just those extra 2 or 3 questions when introduced to a new concept. I think that's a really important thing to possess. So
can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So I just want to paraphrase here and summarize. So 4 years ago?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
4 years ago, you had this idea, you want to build a tech company. It was a reading app. It is still to this day an app, and we'll get into what it does now. But I remember Whammy signing up on it a couple of years ago. I had 3 or 4 of our Exco team members reading the Lean Startup. So there's this app that you have on your phone. You can download it. You can invite people. There's this shared learning experience. And then over the years, this changed, this morphed. Just maybe share with the audience, Louis, a couple of iterations. And you spoke about, experiences and iterations and how important that is. And that ultimately gets you to your vision statement. But what was the transition of Bookt over the last 4 years?
I think the Lean Startup is a good place to start when you talk about pivots and you talk about the journey. I mean, that is the book to read, right? So we originally started, the whole idea was, reading was very important to me as a kid. I read more than I probably should. I spent more hours in a book than anywhere else. And nonfiction became quite important as I got older. And it always bothered me that I was learning so much in nonfiction, probably more than any one of the university degrees.
Yeah.
But it's not accredited. I can't put it on my CV. I can't apply to a job. Yeah. So that's where Bookt started, was let's actually formalize nonfiction reading. Let's turn it into a method of recognizable education. So to get more people reading nonfiction so they can go apply for that marketing job or whatever it may be. So
apart from during the reading journey, sparking the curiosity in your own thinking, there's also this reward at the end that I can put somewhere and it counts for something.
Yes.
Yeah.
It needs to be, I wouldn't say it needs to be, but it very much is important to be accredited so that it is actually tangible. You can use it in today's working world. I can go to Outsurance and say, I've read, this is marketing, alchemy, these 5 books, this is what my marketing philosophy stems from.
Yeah.
If that person's also read those books, you're speaking the same language. But how would they believe that you have actually read those books? You could just make it up. And that's the problem we wanted to solve. So that's where we started. As we were building, we were approached by a corporate who said, look, I know you guys are doing something with books. At the end of the day, I just want my people to read. I've bought them all these books, but I don't know if they're actually reading them. So obviously, that's an immediate use case for Bookt. We can help you not only get your people reading, but prove to you that they are actually reading. So that's when we started working with corporates. Back then, we were really working with exclusive books a lot. So we would deliver the physical books at a corporate's office. I don't like logistics, so that was very complicated. But we did realize that we've got big ambitions in terms of scaling worldwide. So we need the actual digital books. We need to be the suppliers of the books. So that's where the journey to go get the publishers started. Now,
right.
That's a whole other conversation. The publishers, I have a lot of experience with them now. It's a very interesting
industry and world in itself.
Yeah. They're at a very interesting point in time, which I'm sure we can get to later. But nonetheless, it was very difficult for the then 26-year-old South African to get the attention of these publishers and say, look, please give us our books. We promise we've got good security and we won't lose your books. It's a very complicated story to sell.
We will distribute them ethically,
yes,
and they will belong in the right hands, and then people will read. We promise.
Exactly. So we got the one publisher, quite similar to investors. You know, it's very difficult to get your first one, but once you've got the first one, the second's a bit easier, then third, fourth, fifth. So we got the first publisher, Shet, and we have been working with onboarding a lot more since then, obviously. So finally, we could actually provide the books. So that's when you started scaling to corporates, helping them get individual teams within their companies reading these books on the app together. Bookt was growing there for quite some time, and then I left for the US last year. Now that's
a pivotal moment.
Yes, very much so. That's when things changed a lot. I'm sure we'll chat a little bit about the US aspect, so I won't dive too deep into that now. But essentially what it came down to is through everything I learned there, not only about how they look at startups, look at markets, look at scaling, etc., but also Bookt's position, how we can scale where we are. We realized we do need it's a very, we didn't have competition in that B2B market. Yeah. That sounds great on paper, but there's always a reason. It's a very difficult market, very difficult model to crack. And we realized we needed a more scalable model in a bigger market. So that's where the inclusion of, I would say fiction, but that's where the inclusion of the consumer market actually, that's where that, call it pivot, started, was let's start selling all these books we have to all the people that actually want these books. But over and above that, I think that's when the big materialization of the long-term goal of Bookt to actually build that next generation of a book started, especially with all the work, we've done in AI and the people we've met in America. And, we worked with a lot of AI research labs there on what they're building, where they're going. So the big mission for us is to actually build that next generation of a book, one that literally adapts. You want to see a scene in Lord of the Rings, you can see the scene, you can see the characters, you can hear the audio. So it's literally turning a static book into a dynamic, personalized experience. Whether it's fiction or non-fiction doesn't really matter. It's the core engine we're building that then allows the transformation of this content, of these stories. So that's where I want to call it an X book. I've got a very good friend in the UK who has that trademarked. I'm still going to speak to
X
about
book.
Yeah, I'm still going to speak to about whether I can use that. But it's for us, it's very much reigniting humanity's curiosity through building the next generation of a book.
Okay. I want to. That was a mouthful.
So yeah, it was a lot.
But I think there's so many golden nuggets in this. So one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you in this conversation is the South African startup scene. I mean, we're more or less the same age in terms of tenure of business. I've just seen evolve and grow over the last couple of years. There's a lot of emphasis. Companies like the Innovation City and Civitas and Mark Shaman Suits and Sneakers. And there's just a whole bunch of, especially Cape Town, now Joburg has got a startup club. There's a big emphasis, and maybe it's just from my perspective, but I just feel like the last couple of years there's been a big emphasis on startups and seeing South African success stories. So here's a couple of golden nuggets I took from this so far. Firstly, the iterative approach and the experimentation approach is something that we read about, but I have not heard that often organizations successfully implement and do. And for me, there's a difference between scrambling because you're desperate and you're out of options, and really meticulously going through this process based on client feedback. One of the things that we did the last year was started using Whamly ourselves, 8 hours a day, 10 Whamly employees in Whamly, 8 hours a day. Like, that feedback back to the dev team has been gold, because now we're feeling the pain, the joy, the frustration, seeing the opportunities, not waiting for a client to give you client feedback is extremely important, but we're not always sure to what extent the feedback is the real emotion behind that comment, because they like us, or we've got a nice brand, or maybe they don't care that much. But the moment you're deeply entrenched in it and you're open for that feedback, that iterative approach can begin. So I think that's a crucial moment of this conversation to date. Secondly, is not being stuck on an initial vision around a B2B business that's helping L&D as an economic buyer in the HR department help their employees learn. But really understanding and being exposed to something like the US, and I would love for us to dive into that now, around what are the possibilities, and then being okay with that vision shifting and changing. Because I think often entrepreneurs and startups are fixated with their vision and their website. That's the first two things that need to be in place before we even go and look for a client. And so you've got this beautiful designed business with zero revenue. So just again, I think good learning for the audience around what is a way to go about transitioning through this journey.
Fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
There we go.
That's the quickest
way to
say it.
Become obsessed with the problem.
I think what you said about Whamly using it 8 hours a day is, and I want to use another company called Cursor. Cursor is the fastest growing company in history. It's a Y Combinator company. So it's in Silicon or San Francisco. It's a team of 12, 15 guys. Got together in a room one day and started building Cursor. They went from $0 to $100 million in revenue in 2 years. And Cursor is an IDE, which is essentially just a place for you to program. So I use Cursor to help me to program quicker. So the guys building Cursor are using Cursor to build Cursor.
Yes.
So that's the fastest feedback loop from a product point of view, which is, you can't say it's the only reason they've grown so quickly, but
it should be a huge contributing factor.
Absolutely. I mean, the pace of development and how quickly they react to problems in the product is
every hour,
even quicker.
Yeah.
That is one thing I would, and also another thing Paul Graham says, the best way to build a startup idea is not to go think of an idea and build it. It's just build something you would use yourself. If you're using something yourself, you're very quickly going to see, no, this is irritating, this doesn't work for me, change it, fix it, ask friends to help, etc. So So I would say use it yourself. You guys are spot on correct. Just use it yourself. We fortunately, we at Bookt read a lot. So the team is reading a lot. So we get a lot of feedback around, hey, these images aren't generating correctly, or this doesn't translate, or whatever. And that really does help. Validated learning is, from the lean startup, very important concept. And this is essentially, you need that brutal feedback. But someone who's using your app for free is not going to give that to you, because there's no, they've got nothing to lose. So you need paying users or paying people to give you the feedback, which you then action.
Exactly.
That's very, very important to get the paying people. The free
100%.
people won't give you the right.
I think that's maybe one of the reasons why a lot of the SaaS companies have canned freemium. But I mean, separate conversation. Louis, let's go to US, right? Fascinating. From my perspective, it feels like Silicon Valley is like they so far ahead. It's almost this world that we can't access, that might be part of the South African conditioning around our mindset. But you hop on a plane and you go to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, spend 3-4 months there. Like most startup founders' dream. What was that like?
I would suggest every founder, actually. I spoke to some of our investors about this. I think it's one of the best investments a startup can make is for their founder to go spend. Doesn't have to be 4 months, but go spend a month there. That money you spend for the time there, is the ROI on that is just through the roof. I mean, what it does to your thinking and how you look at your startup, but also how you look at markets in general. It's going to change the game completely. So it's something I would highly recommend. I know it's not always possible, but if it is within your means, I do think it's a very valuable investment. So I lived there for 4 months. I was in 2 weeks in San Diego, a couple of weeks in Mountain View, and then most of the time in San Francisco. I wasn't living lavishly.
Yeah,
as you
I
can imagine, it's expensive. So I went there with my hiking bag and I moved from house to house and really living that nomadic lifestyle. But it's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything. I'm literally chomping at the bits to get back to the US, Silicon Valley, or San Francisco to be more specific. But you are right. I do think it does seem so far away until you get, and then you realize it's just a city like all other cities. But the people there, that's what makes it incredible. And I met a couple of South Africans that side, really doing incredible work. And I must say, just on a side note, that's one thing I picked up, where the South Africans seem to be performing so well when they get internationally, all the ones I meet at least. I mean, you've got the CEO of Sequoia, Roelof Botha.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he grew up in Pretoria. So your South Africans traveling, and the ones I met in Silicon Valley and San Francisco are really building incredible companies, doing very, very well.
Maybe take you back to something that I'm sure someone listening might wonder. So, okay, my investors say I can fly over. I fly over. You said, okay, you backpack from house to house. So I'm assuming friends or family or a relative or someone that likes you or giving you a flat or a bed or something to. But then practically, what do you do for the 4 months? How do you meet people? How do you get exposed to this world, this thinking, these founders? Are there events? Is there a program that you subscribe to? Is it literally word of mouth, where the one introduces you to the other? Like, how did that work? Because I imagine that's where the learning and the aha moments and the opening of the mind happened.
Yeah, I would say one thing I do regret is not actually spending a little bit more time beforehand, preparing for it in the sense of understanding not just San Francisco, but the ecosystems, because you need to tap into some of the ecosystems. Two things I would say there is, number one, if you really are passionate about what you are building and you are willing to tell people about it, then San Francisco opens up for you. And that's what I think is a massive difference between the US or San Francisco specifically and anywhere else, is they do want to help you succeed. How they look at risk and how they look at startups is very different. So if you genuinely are passionate about what you're building and you go there and you tell people what you're building, things open up for you very quickly. But they do have little groups, I would say, cliques, if you will, that if you can get into them or you kind of get involved with them somehow, it does open up quite a few things. There's one, it's called an accelerator, if you will. I met some of the guys there on X or Twitter. That's a big thing in San Francisco, is the social, but specifically X. And I started playing soccer with him. And then from there, I actually got invited into the accelerator. And there I actually just gave my time away. And I said, look, this is me. These are my skills. Can I help some of you with whatever you need? And I actually worked with quite a few of the startups, jumping from company to company. That's probably where I learned the most. But I mean, you can imagine, you then meet 3 founders. Those founders have friends. And then it really compounds very, very quickly. And there is an event, probably 3 to 5 events every night, where it is guys who have started $500 million companies speaking. You can go and speak to them. I mean, I spoke to Eric Ries, the lead startup. Yeah, you can just go and speak to them. Like this, that was a Beehive event, actually, a massive newsletter company. So you have all these tech companies that host all these events, and you're in their offices in Cloudflare, Beehive, wherever, and you're meeting all these entrepreneurs, and you just need to, again, be passionate about what you're doing and go speak about
story.
It.
Okay.
So you won't struggle to find an event. There are applications, Luma and stuff like that really will hook you up into the ecosystem. But the biggest thing is be passionate about what you're doing and go talk about it.
I think that's super important, is to be passionate about something and talk about it implies that you deeply care and that you deeply understand why you're doing this. I don't think it's sustainable to be fake around your passion. You can maybe fake it for an evening at an event, but to go and fake it for 4 months is going to be impossible. So maybe for the listeners as well, even if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, you don't have to nail the vision immediately, but be passionate about solving the problem, or at least the journey. I always say, our slogan is help the world hire better people faster. And in that, we don't mention video interview. Purposefully, we didn't, because we didn't know. It starts with video interview and let's see how it goes. Let's see where we go. But we are deeply passionate about people and employment and getting jobs and helping organizations hire. So that's something cool that you mentioned. What lessons or differences did you observe from that ecosystem and the South African one?
I would say you could break it up to 2 levels. The one's maybe more ideological or maybe a subjective, where those other ones maybe a little bit more objective. I'll start with the objective one. You can't take what works there and bring it back here. It's great to look at it and say they do it that way, so we should also do it. It's probably not going to work, in all honesty. They have a much better network environment. Their view on startups are completely different. It's a very mature environment when it comes to startups, but the capital is very different there to here. I mean, Silicon Valley, I think in 2023, the amount invested into early startups, 30 billion, just in that little space, whereas the next or second spot, I think, was either London or New York at 3 billion.
That's
so 10
10x.
times, yeah. So you can't really compare it. So
I would love to know the South African equivalent in our country in that year.
Yeah, I think Africa. No, I don't want to speak out of tune here, but we probably aren't more than 500 million US. Even that seems a bit high. But anyway. So you've got a lot more capital. So what works there won't necessarily work here. But objectively, a lot of things I picked up was they have much smaller teams for much longer. One thing I realized in South Africa is we do like hiring very quickly because we want a head of marketing, a head of this, a head of that. But they have very condensed teams and everyone kind of does everything until they reach that product market fit, at which stage they'll go raise proper capital. And then the VCs will actually help them hire for those positions. Yeah. So they really keep it close, 4, 5, 6 people building that company until product market fit, where you'll have, or they also stack their companies with engineers. So, I mean, most of the companies I met there, 90+% of them were engineers. They build the product. They are directly involved in the product. So that you can actually maybe just abstract a level and say they seem to focus, or they definitely focus way more on the actual product. Whereas we sometimes focus a lot more on the
brand and the story.
And I think South Africa, there's maybe not a popular opinion, but a lot of people I've met like playing entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the realities of actually what that means, it's very different. So, it's great talking on stages and all of these things and doing all these podcasts. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is building a product that people want.
Yeah.
So
And are willing to pay you for.
and they're willing to pay you for. So just objectively, smaller teams, they pretty much all engineers. They'll have an engineer doing SEO, another engineer just doing social media, but just talking about the product until they hit product market fit. And then obviously there's way more capital, so funding is, but obviously they have a higher cost of living, so it does. But then subjectively, I think the difference, as I've picked up at least, was the attitude towards risk.
The mindset.
Very much. Where in South Africa, it's very, failure is the boogeyman. You can't fail, right? If you fail, it's the end of the world. And those guys will fail 3 or 4 times in the space of 2 years on startups and then hit a 5th one that just flies.
Yeah.
The investors understand it, the stakeholders, everyone in that ecosystem understands that, and they expect it. As a matter of fact, most of them even encourage it. Like,
yeah, you have to.
You have to. Like, what are you doing? Why are you moving slowly? Move faster, fail, and then move on type of thing. So
I love that.
the attitude towards risk is way different. But I would say they are fairly unique in that. It's not that I say it's that and South Africa. It's they have a very different attitude to risk than anywhere else I've seen.
Yeah.
They almost want to fail in a very weird way, where they're willing to take those massive moonshots, and they'll say, look, there's a 1% chance this succeeds, but
if it does.
Yes. So they're very aware of the fact that they most likely will fail. That's fine. And they're transparent about it. They'll tell their VCs and their investors, listen, we're probably going to fail, but if we do hit it, we're going all the way.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah. So it's a very different mindset around just risk, I would say.
Louis, I listen to that and I go, as entrepreneurs in South Africa, we then have this opportunity, because what you're describing, I want to take slightly further and say that is, to a large extent, a South African mindset. We are in a difficult country. I mean, we've been through a lot. Risk isn't encouraged here. Resources aren't that abundant for everybody. We know our unemployment. We know the political environment, the socioeconomic environment. So it's hard in South Africa to have that abundance mindset. And so for the few entrepreneurs and businesses that do have that, I would encourage them to share that story more, to create this real sense of hope and inspire more people to adopt that mindset. There are so many incredible billionaires in South Africa who've made it, whose story we don't often hear. In fact, the one or a few that I've met where I physically approached to try and have a conversation very similar to the one that you had with Eric, I was shut down. I was literally at a conference last year, very, very famous family. I will not say the name, right? On stage, speaking passionately about this event and how they are so proud to host it. I approached this gentleman afterwards, and he just literally ignored me. Like, shut me down, boom, walked off. And I thought to myself, that right there was an opportunity for him to instill hope and inspiration to me. And he just shrugged me off. So I think maybe a call to action to the audience to say, listen, if you are doing well, or if you still have this passion or this hope in you, like, share it. Share your story. There's an organization down the road here in Menlo Park. Again, I won't mention the name. They've got $1 billion valuation. They're changing the world. They're a medtech company. And I spoke to the CEO the other night. I said, share your story. Like, you're 190 people. You're doing incredible things. Share your story. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think South Africa, what you said there is very true, and I fully agree with it. One thing I realized there in Silicon Valley is you can't walk down the road without bumping into a unicorn or a decacorn or even a centi, even a $200, $300, $400 million founder. They're everywhere. And they are more than happy to chat about what they're doing, why they're doing it, etc. So you have so many examples.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, we just don't. And the few we do, as you say, aren't forthcoming for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they aren't forthcoming about it. So I fully agree that South Africa does need more examples of people taking risk, people succeeding, and then telling their story. I think shout out to Matthew and the Startup Club. I think they're doing a good job in trying to get those entrepreneurs onto somewhat of a stage and tell their story. And I think that's a great first step. And I think we need more. And it's tricky because we are facing somewhat of a cold start problem. whereas Silicon Valley has solved it in the 60s. So, they're roaring and it looks great, but it's very difficult to get to a point where you've built that ecosystem where people are sharing their successes and their failures. That's a very important thing, is also talking about the failures. That's why I say those guys in the US, they'll fail 3 or 4 times then succeed. They have no problem telling you about the 3 or 4 times they failed and why they failed.
Yes.
They'll also tell you about the success. I mean, that's very good to learn. Very
Super
good.
powerful.
Exactly. So I agree fully with you. I think more people should tell their stories. Tell their stories for their story's sake and not just to kind of that play the entrepreneur role, which that is something I have noticed a little bit, which isn't, I don't really think that's positive for the ecosystem.
Well, it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. I mean, Mark Andreesen, one of the big VCs in the US, said he can very quickly tell when someone's playing entrepreneur versus is entrepreneur. He just asks more and more increasingly technical questions about the problem they're trying to, or say they're trying to solve. Very quickly they unravel. I kind of took that and tested it out, and it's very, very true, where you just ask a few more, a couple of layers of more and more difficult questions, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And I do think that hurts the ecosystem when you have so many people playing entrepreneur but not actually doing it, because it is difficult.
That's hard.
And then they tell their stories, but their stories aren't grounded in truth.
Yeah.
And then they're spreading the wrong messages around, what you should do or how you should do it, etc. So I think more people that have actually succeeded should tell their story, and fewer people that are trying to succeed should tell their stories as if they had succeeded.
And listen more to the ones that they can learn from.
Yes.
Yes.
Very much.
Louis, we can go on the whole day. I want to wrap up by asking you one more question. And, Whamly, solving the people puzzle, the content most of the time is about people and talent acquisition, hiring, HR-related themes and topics. I know, and I know you know, that hiring is difficult. Hiring in an enterprise is different to a SMB, is different to a startup, different to a scale-up. What are one of the 2 lessons that you've learned around hiring in Bookt?
It's probably the most difficult thing you can do. I don't really think there's something more difficult than finding the right people in the right roles. It's essentially the make or break of your company, right? And so I've learned a lot of lessons and you are very right, and we briefly spoke about this before, and the differences between enterprise hiring and startup hiring, where for a startup, the risk is way higher in terms of hiring the wrong person, whereas an enterprise, they don't really have that much of a risk. So, and I mean, we can't really have this conversation without talking about AI, right?
No,
I mean,
we can't.
this is something we're deeply embedded in and something we're building out very quickly. And I mentioned Google before, and I'll just start there just to set the tone, because I think it is important to note Google has not been hiring. They've actually been letting go people, so they've been decreasing the employee count while growing revenue. So I do think the hiring landscape is changing very quickly. It's no longer just a role. It's, does this person come with the expertise to fulfill that by using the latest AI tech and what.
And the role that they're coming into might not be there in the next 6 months, but I still might need your skills. So can you move with the role?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think anyone being, looking for a new job, is very important that you are adaptable in terms of the new technology, because I know enterprise may be a little bit slower than startups to adopt that hiring process, but I can already see the startups I'm involved with, and us specifically, when we hire for a role, the very first question we need to understand or ask is their expertise in AI, and can they fulfill that role using this technology? Because one person is now equal to 5. And that's, so, you wouldn't hire someone that cannot give the output of 4 or 5 people by using the AI, but, that doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
So I think startups are realizing that, and obviously in the US, they've got that down to a T. And I think in South Africa, it's definitely coming in, where the teams will be a little bit smaller. But it's more important to hire right then. So I think the risks are even higher now, because we don't have the luxury of, I said luxury, that sounds terrible, but in the US, their labor markets work very differently. Someone's not working out, where in South Africa, we've got a very different process. And I do respect why we've got the process, but it cripples small companies. that's, I think, one of the things in the Startup Act they're trying to push through is a change in.
Well, it comes down to cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. And but also just time. I mean, the time taken to sort out an incorrect hire or it's a lot. That's time you should be spending speaking to the customer or speaking to the client or understanding your product, etc. So just from a small startup point of view, we've obviously hired a few people now, and why I mentioned AI is because moving forward, we won't ever be hiring someone who is not extremely proficient in it and is curious about the technology and willing to keep up with the rapid development thereof. But your risks are very high. So I think that concept of pre-hiring is more and more important to me, where everyone I'm meeting along my journey, I'm just making notes of them and understanding, is this someone I could speak to in the future? So you really want to put time into recruiting. But maybe just to close off the startup hiring aspect. So I think for a startup, the risks are much higher when it comes to hiring.
Yes.
The founders, and it is the founder's job, needs to be it's one of your main roles as the founder, CEO, is to hire the right people. Because if you're hiring the wrong person, that's on you. You did not spend time to go find the right person. So startups I wouldn't say have a process, whereas enterprise have a process, and you're obviously very, very familiar with that process. So from a startup point of view, it's your job as the founder to go find the right people that are aligned with your company's, not just vision, but culture. Yeah. Someone working in a startup is going to work very differently to someone working in an enterprise.
100%.
And I think the talent pool in South Africa are very conditioned to the enterprise style of work and not the startup style of work. And that there's a little bit of a mismatch, which does make it quite difficult. So,
and a very cool opportunity to do something about it.
Yes. Very, very cool opportunity. So I think startups need to be very careful in hiring. I think the risk is very high. It does put you back if you make a mistake there. So you need to spend a lot of time as the founder making sure you're finding the right people. And also, I would say it's not just hiring someone for the sake of hiring someone. Don't hire a marketer. You need to do the marketing yourself first, understand what you need to hire in the first place or who you need to hire. So try and delay your hiring as much as possible until you absolutely have to. And only at that point, you'll really know what you need to hire for.
I love what you said earlier around the smaller teams in the US. 6 engineers all doing everything, where the core focus is on product market fit. And once you hit that, get the raise, have them help you hire the right resources, and then put foot on the petrol.
And that's why the US, I think, they've got that down to a T. That network understands new tech company, especially now in this world of AI. The timelines that VCs are expecting now is literally, it's half as long, if not
from raise to exit.
Yes. I mean, you've got Cursor getting to 100 million revenue in 2 years. So Y Combinator has changed their goals for their companies from you need to be at a 1 million revenue per year in your first year to 10 million. Sure. Just based on what's possible. And they're doing that with teams the same size, if not smaller than what it always used to be. So smaller teams, stack them with engineers or product-focused people. Everyone kind of does whatever they need to do to get the product out there into paying clients' hands. And then based on the feedback, you iterate. When you hit that product market fit, very different story, because then it startup changes from a push to a pull. Yeah. Before product market fit, you're pushing. Once you hit that, you're being pulled. And when you're being pulled, you know exactly where you need to hire and who you need to hire. So enterprise hiring I'm not too familiar with it, in all honesty, but startups have dealt with a lot. I think enterprise, however, what I would say is need to also, they need to pay attention to the AI stuff. Yeah. It is crucial. I'm seeing startups in the US, 20-man teams outcompeting enterprises from customer service to product to marketing just because they're adopting the latest technology. So we have an opportunity here where everyone has this technology. So these enterprises really need to double down and implement this technology because it can leapfrog them
100%.
So far ahead of their competition. If one big bank really, really integrates AI, the differences that'll do to the market and their place in the market it's going to be incredible. So I would say the enterprise need to hire curious people, curious about AI, get them in, help them teach your organization about AI, help them get your organization to adopt AI, and just you need to be looking at the technology.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to come back and do another episode on AI alone, I think maybe as a closing comment from my side, what we're seeing and what I'm experiencing is the AI is overwhelming, but no one is really too clear or sure what to do with it and where to implement it, that there's actual ROI. And then we're back to using ChatGPT to just rewrite an email in a better way, which is not nearly why it's designed, right? Or what it can do. So, Louis, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your story. I think, as I passionately said earlier today, sharing that story is super powerful and empowering and inspiring for other founders like myself. I wish Bookt and you all the best. Maybe I'll join you on your next US trip. But it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francois. Maybe just one last thing before I head off. And this is going to be a cheeky plug. That question you said about companies don't know how to use AI. In building Bookt, we realized we built an incredibly strong engine. So companies have started just using our AI because it's simple. And the AI actually teaches you how to use the AI.
Gold.
So we've actually gone into companies and taught them, done sessions with them, and we're seeing that. And what you say is 100% correct. I agree fully with it. Companies don't know how to use it. And that is a problem we realized. We've built the tech for it. So, we've seen quite a few businesses adopt that already. And I do think it's going to be quite important. But I hope you are on the next US trip.
I will be.
I'm leaving soon, so I hope that visa is ready.
I'll have to chat to the wife.
But no, thank you so much for having me, Francois.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure chatting.
Thanks, Louis.
Cheers, man.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode on everything startup, scale up, tech, AI, hiring in small businesses, small teams. I deeply hope that you got a lot of insights and value from this, and that if you are an entrepreneur, an inspiring entrepreneur, a startup, a scale up, if there was one thing that I hope that you take from this episode is to share your story, to share your lessons learned, be vulnerable. I think we're a small enough community here in South Africa that we are supposed to work together and to help each other, support each other, as opposed to doing this in a silo and then hoping that we are the next Silicon Valley. South Africa definitely has the talent. We've got the energy, the perseverance, the grit. If we can hold hands more and share more, I think it'll be better for the ecosystem and everybody. Thanks so much for listening to Solving the People Puzzle. If you enjoyed today's episode, can you please go and like, subscribe, and even leave us a 5-star rating? If you have any questions around how to create the ultimate end-to-end hiring solution, head over to whammy.io so that we can help you hire better people faster. Catch you next time.